Good morning, Facebook friends, MeWe friends, wherever this ends up. I wanted to just share another recipe with you today. So I make my own hot chocolate mix, and it is hot chocolate season. People in North Dakota anyway, it's hot chocolate season. Hot chocolate, cold chocolate, any chocolate, right? Let's just make it clear that I love chocolate. I will not be shy about that. But I do make my own because it is a sugar-free version, and I prefer to save my sugar calories in other foods if I have a choice. So, and I am pretty particular about my cocoa powder. So we're gonna talk a little bit about cocoa powder this morning too, okay? So first of all, let's talk about cocoa powder is from cocoa beans, obviously, right? The beans are fermented, they're dried, and then they're roasted. And then they crack them into cocoa nibs, okay? So then the nibs pressed, and they remove about 75% of that cocoa butter. All right, so then the leaves, this leaves us with like a chocolate liqueur type pasty substance. And then that gets dried and ground. And that's what gives us unsweetened cocoa powder. Shazam, there it is. Okay, so then the cocoa powder, there are a couple different varieties of cocoa powder. So we're gonna talk about Dutched cocoa powder, and we're going to talk about natural cocoa powder. This particular recipe calls for Dutched cocoa powder, and this is one of the reasons why. Okay, so Dutched cocoa powder, when they process it, they put it through an alkalizing solution, which is potassium carbonate. So it makes that product neutral, okay? It alkalizes it, it's neutral after it's been washed. So because it's neutral, it doesn't react with baking soda, which makes a difference in your recipes. Okay, does that make sense? So it's usually paired with baking powder, all right? So it, by nature, is gonna have a mellower flavor than its cousin, natural cocoa powder, right? Because it's neutral rather than acidic, so it's gonna have a mellower flavor. It's gonna dissolve easily in liquids, and it's gonna be darker in color. Those are the properties then of this Dutched cocoa. It does not mean it wears little wooden shoes. Okay, natural. So the natural cocoa powder is just that, it's natural. It's acidic in nature, it's very strong, very concentrated, and it can even be bitter to the flavor, okay? So if you have a recipe calling for baking soda, the two react together then, okay? So you have the acid and the base, and that gives you a leavening agent. So that is why it can be important on which one you need in a recipe, okay? So when you're walking your grocery store aisles, when you pick up Hershey's cocoa, that's a natural cocoa. But if it does call for Dutched, you should be using that particular Dutched cocoa, and that's the reason, okay? So if there's no leavening occurring, if there's no raising in your recipe like a cake batter, it really doesn't matter. You can use what you want. So when we're talking about hot chocolate mix, a sauce, ice cream, pudding, brownies, things that aren't gonna rise, you can use whichever powder you want. But if your recipe does call for a particular variety, you probably wanna be asking yourself the questions if that makes sense, right? So even like an old, okay, here, your favorite old family church cookbook, right? So the recipe says cocoa. Okay, if it just says cocoa powder without specifying, generally you would want to be using the natural cocoa powder, okay? Because the acid is usually necessary, and specifically, the acid is gonna make a difference, okay? So, yeah, that would be our main differences between those two. Now, our new kid on the block, cacao powder, we're gonna save that for a different conversation because you're hearing that term thrown around a lot these days too. But let's get right down to my recipe now that you know the differences. So we are using the Dutched because it dissolves better in liquid. It's got a mellower flavor, and that's what I want, okay? So here is my hot chocolate container, and I need to refill it, obviously. So my recipe calls for confectioner's sugar, which is powdered sugar, right? I am not using that. I am using stevia, so I'm measuring out stevia instead. Stevia has no calories in it. It's from a natural source, and that's why I want that. It is twice as strong as sugar. So if your recipe calls, like in my case, calls for a cup of confectioner's sugar, I'm using a half of a cup of stevia. okay? So I'm gonna dump that in. My recipe calls for 1/2 cup of my cocoa powder, Dutch process, which is what I have from Penzies. Quality matters, people. All right, so we are going to use our Dutch processed cocoa, and we are going to use 1/2 cup of that. And of course, this can be adjusted to your taste buds, so when you try it, you can just see if it works for you. Maybe you're used to something a little bit stronger, or more bitter. Maybe the natural is what you prefer, but this is going to dissolve much better for you in a liquid, okay? Next ingredient, non-fat milk powder, which makes sense, right? Dry milk. That gives it our creaminess that we're looking for, so we're wanting 1.25 cups of dry milk powder. I don't really even use milk in our house anymore. We just don't drink it. So we do keep powdered milk on hand for many recipes because you can just mix it up as you need it. Pretty sweet deal when you don't drink milk anymore. All right, so 1.25. Next thing, fine grain salt. So to me, that just means table salt. And yeah, that is a real deal. Like, it will bring out the sweetness in this to add salt. Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, but it's a thing. So 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We're just gonna kind of eyeball that as well. And then 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. Now, I think they just use this. You see this in other drink powders as well, or I have. Cornstarch is just gonna kind of make everything flow better. Does that make sense? So yeah, it's just gonna make it kind of mix well together. So this is 1 teaspoon of cornstarch. And then the secret ingredient, now this is why I like it, I think, cayenne pepper. This is the hot stuff, people. So you need to use this as you will. Fair warning. You will feel this heat, but it's a good heat, okay? So it's calling for a pinch or more to taste. So a pinch for me, that was probably about 1/8 teaspoon, I'm guessing. And you can adjust that, of course, too. And then I shake it up in my container, but I think I'll put the right lid on it first so I don't have cayenne pepper on my cocoa lid. Whoops. Okay, so we're gonna put that back on here. And then I just shake it up right in here and we are good to go. And I'm gonna show you how nice this dissolves because I actually did boil some water on the stove. I think that's just a sentimental thing too. Of course you can do it in the microwave, but I like really hot water if I'm gonna do this. So there we go. That is it. All right, so I have my mug here so you can see it when I get it dissolved. I just add a couple like heaping kitchen spoonfuls and just a little bit more because this is a bigger mug. And we're gonna add some hot water. So here's my tea kettle. They're kind of a thing of the past too, aren't they? Kind of sad. There it is. Can you see it steaming? Oh, it smells so good, you guys. Ooh, yum, yum. Oh yeah, delicious. But look at how nice that dissolved in seconds, right? It's beautiful. It's beautiful. We're just gonna try it. Oh yeah, that's the stuff. It's so good, you guys. I hope you try this. And if you have a recipe that's different that you want to share, please do. This is just the one that I use, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference in cocoa powder so you could learn something. So Kelly, isn't that fun? That was a gift. It's always fun to get something I would never do for myself or buy for myself. All right, so give it a try and let me know what you think, and I hope it warms your innards. I hope you have something fun on the menu plan today. Hot chocolate would be the first thing on my menu plan today, and it probably will be the last thing on my menu plan today too. Have a great day.